When I walked into the prison reception center, I thought I was walking into Shawshank. My name is Jesse, and I spent 19 years in the Virginia prison system. I was in the county jail for about 10 months, between being arrested, pleading guilty to the charges I had committed, and then being sentenced to twice the high point of the sentencing guidelines. So 32 years rather than the 10 to 16 years called for by the guidelines. A few weeks after that, they packed me up, they put me in my street clothes, they gave me my jacket back, and they loaded me in the back of what looked like a cop car, and I was actually the only person on this transport, which was bizarre, because all of a sudden I'm just riding down the road, this hour trip, looking out the window, like almost feeling like a normal person again, because I'm wearing normal clothes, and yeah, I'm wearing shackles and a black box and, ankle irons, but I'm looking out into the world, and it felt bizarre. So we pull up to this prison, and it's this ancient prison, built in the 1920s, just all this brick and these giant gun towers, and it just looked crazy. Then you walk inside and it looks even crazier. You have 3 tiers rising like 50 or 60 feet in the air. You have bars on the cell doors. It was bizarre. And I remember I walked in, and just a minute after I walked in and I didn't know where I was supposed to go, all the doors start popping on the second tier and guys just start running out, and some are running to the shower and some are running downstairs, and then they're running out the back door. I'm like, is this an escape attempt? Like, what is going on here? But what I didn't realize is the tiers were released on a different system. So like the bottom tier would go out and they would have outside rec, and then they would come in, and then the top tier would go out and they would have outside rec. Then the middle tier would go out and they would have outside rec. And everything was scheduled so that nobody was ever out together. None of the tiers were ever mixing. So you would get an hour outside, and then you would get an hour on the pod floor, which is when you were supposed to get your showers, when you were supposed to watch TV or make your food or do whatever you're going to do. But I didn't know any of this yet. At first, I'm like, do I run with them? Like, do I run away from them? Like, I didn't know what to expect. And I went upstairs, and I was actually on that middle tier. So I went into the cell, and I saw this old guy who had not gone out to rec and actually never went out to rec while I was there. I introduced myself, and we got along great. He was a guy who, made some really bad decisions, and he hurt somebody really bad. And I mean, I kind of understand. But we got along, and in a weird way, he was a great introduction because I still had that young energy. Like, I was still trying to prove myself and thinking that I was somebody big, and it was nice to be around somebody who had none of that, like, toxic masculinity, none of that toughness, who was just trying to do his time and go home. So then I was like, all right, well, what am I going to do here? Well, I'm here to be classified. I'm here to determine what security level I'm going to be, but that takes weeks or months. So I'm basically just living my life on, 22 and 1 or 22 and 2 lockdown. Now, sometimes it would let us out for meals and sometimes it would bring us meals, but basically I spent a lot of time in that cell with that old guy. You have no hot water in the cell, like you have a toilet that's basically touching the bed. Like, it was a really close quarters kind of situation, but fortunately, like, we were able to get along. We were okay. And then he got moved to the new side of the reception center. So once you've been there a certain amount of time, you kind of earn the privilege to go to the new side, which actually has like solid floors rather than just tiers. Like, it has a lot more privileges. You're out in the tier or out in the pod all the time. It was just a different situation. And I got somebody new, and this time I was the one like teaching him the ropes or showing him how things worked. And I just thought that was bizarre. But anyways, I was there long enough to make it to the new side. The new side, like I said, was better. You're out of your cell all the time. Like, you actually have a space together. You don't have to like fight for that low down space because you don't have tiers. You actually have floors. You had air conditioning. Like, it was so much better. And while I was there, I was trying to figure out, what do I do? Like, do I get a job? Do I try to get an education? But none of that was really an option because they actually did something that I really thought was great. They would make you basically prove that you needed the money. Like, they would check your account, and if you had money in your account, they wouldn't give you a job because they reserved all the jobs for guys who were indigent or didn't have anybody at home. That makes a lot of sense, right? Like, because if I'm getting $100 a month, I don't need that job that somebody who has no money really needs. So I like that they did that. So finally, after a couple months, they went and they classified me, and they said, all right, well, and I was worried because I had, violent charges. I had a shooting charge. I had a robbery charge. Like, I had a bunch of time. Like, I didn't know what that would mean. And I thought, am I going to a level 5 or am I going to the Supermax? And he said, well, you just barely scored under the 5, so you're going to a level 4. So my options were Nottoway, Keene Mountain, and Sussex 2. And I didn't know what to expect because Keene Mountain was way in the country and they supposedly had really good rec, like a really good weight pile, but it was supposedly run like a really tight institution. Like, they would give you a charge for anything. The cops would beat you up. I was just told, don't go there. Sussex, on the other hand, was totally wide open. Like, you could go there and you could do whatever you wanted and you just really wouldn't have to pay for the consequences except for the consequences from other prisoners. And I was like, all right, that sounds like a little too wide open for me. Like, I want the middle. Like, I want the Goldilocks prison. So I put in for Nottoway, and that's where I was fortunate enough to go, but I didn't know that right away. Like, I requested that. I said that, and then Keene Mountain, and then Sussex, but I didn't know until the day I left, and even as I left, they wouldn't tell me where I was going. So we got to wait, and then while we're on the road actually driving there, the officer said, oh yeah, we're going to Nottoway. But the whole time, I had no idea what to expect because I'd been sitting in the jail and everybody had been saying, oh man, down the road it's going to be great, but also down the road you're going to see guys getting raped every day. And down the road the food's much better, but down the road, like the first time you get stabbed, you'll learn to wear books around your waist. It was like, I don't know what to believe because people are hyping this up, they're minimizing it, and nobody really gave a fair representation. Sometimes I wonder if half the guys that were talking about it had actually ever been to prison and were just kind of weekend warriors going in and out of the jail. But what I found when I got to Nottoway, because I was still kind of worried and nervous and didn't know what was going on and had this tough armor on and thought I was going to have to prove myself, was just people living a life. People just on the phone and people reading books and people going out to work and people taking showers. And it wasn't the chaos and the craziness that I thought until 2 or 3 days in. So about 3 days in, I got up for breakfast the first morning and these two guys start arguing and they go back and forth and one guy steps back and he rips a big knife out of his pocket and the other one steps back and pulls a lock and a sock out and I was just like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? And it was only a few days after that that I got into my first fight because when I came back from Chow, there were guys who had been shooting dice and they shot the dice into my door and they were fishing under my cell or fishing through the cell door trying to get the dice back. But I didn't know that. To me, it looked like a violation. Like, you don't go in another man's space. And again, I'd been kind of boosted up to say, oh, you got to prove a point. So I went over there, basically picked a fight, get the crap beat out of me. Like, people talk all this stuff about the fights they won. I won some, I lost some, but I definitely did not win that one. So I thought my skull was cracked. I ended up being incredibly humbled. I remember the guy, I think he was just worried that he had fucking killed me or something. So he's like coming over there and bringing me like crackers and like Tylenol and stuff. And I'm like, do I have to fight this guy again? Like, I don't know what to do. And that was when I realized, like, welcome to prison. You're here. You finally made it through receiving. Like, this is where you're going to have to be. So you better learn to adapt.